Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. As you may have noticed, the podcast has been quiet for a while. And one of the reasons for that is life is crazy. I want to talk about what happened since then, but the actual reason is I wanted to have an episode on my life before and after HIV, and I could never structure it and I could never know where to start from. And today I have a friend to help me with that, who's gonna bombard me with questions and help me get this recording done. Would you like to say hi?
Hey.
And without further ado, I'm just gonna answer questions and let him run the show, basically.
Hey, tell me about life in Izmir growing up.
I had such a happy childhood, actually. In my father's family, I was the first generation to be born and raised in Turkey, so I was the first generation growing up speaking Turkish. But my mom's family, they're also migrants, but they migrated a couple of generations ago, so they were more integrated, let's call it. But because of my father's foreignness, I grew up as the odd kid out. I was always too feminine and flamboyant, and I was coming from a multicultural family: Turkish, English, Greek, Albanian. There were 4 languages spoken in the house, and because my father lived in the States, I was the weird kid growing up that was extremely flamboyant and was dressing like an American kid. So that led me to being bullied since the beginning of my education, and I was heavily bullied throughout primary school and middle school. I would literally have people chasing me down the street after school, and my mom would think we were playing.
Tell me how it made you feel. How was your experience of life being chased home from school by nasty boys?
It was disgusting. It led to 2 things. First, this shame that was installed in me. It happened very early on. Second, this anger that was building up in me that I didn't realize the aggression that I was experiencing was also accumulating in me. But at the time, I was just ashamed of being who I am. I was afraid of being who I am, and I was just almost used to all the aggression and bullying, so it wasn't great.
It sounds like your mum was not able to see that you were being bullied and that it left you dealing with it alone. Talk a bit about that.
No, and we actually had a confrontation last summer because I reached a point in my life where I'm 32. I have several degrees and I should be doing things, but I still doubt myself and I don't do them, or I feel like I cannot do them. So she was asking me, what's holding you back? What's holding you back? And I told her about the bullying. And she refused all of it. And I guess it made her feel incompetent as a parent. But they were really young. My mom was 21 years old when she had me. So when I first started getting bullied, she was only 26, 27 probably. So she had no idea how to manage it. She was not equipped. And she couldn't safeguard me as much as she should, I guess. And my father was always traveling, so he wasn't around. And he had his own struggle integrating in Turkey, let alone ease my integration. So I think he just chose to let my mom do it. And it kind of backfired at certain points.
Talk about dealing with that experience alone, of dealing with being bullied alone as a child with not even support, but no recognition from your caregivers that this is what you're experiencing.
It's funny because I was telling my mom how lonely I felt growing up last summer, and she refused all of it, saying you were always surrounded by cousins and friends at school, which is true. I was surrounded by people around my age, but I was being bullied by them. So in that crowd, I always felt lonely. There were a couple of things that I did handling that loneliness. I swam a lot under the water. Things were quiet and I could find peace under the water. So I spent a lot of time on the sea, on the boats. I would wander into the nature and just spend as much time as possible in nature. Because the adults around me weren't doing their job, I'm going to say, I learned really early on how to survive on my own. Because I had to protect myself. I had to be able to notice danger before it reached me so I could walk away from it. That mostly meant keeping an eye out for my bullies and staying away from them, and also avoiding situations that would put me in that position as well. So very early on, I was able to survive and fight for my survival, I would say.
Tell me about moving to Istanbul from Izmir.
Yeah, Istanbul will always be my true home. I think I was 16, 15, around those ages that I saw a video from Istanbul Pride. YouTube was barely a thing, and the video was on YouTube. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is happening in Istanbul. That is also where I have to be. I have to go there. So I moved there. I moved there for my bachelor's degree in business administration in German. Choices were made. The first year I stayed at a dorm. The second year I moved in with my partner at the time. We built our home together and I was living my dream life, right? I was 18 in Istanbul, had my own apartment, living with my partner. We adopted a cat. We were raising our daughter together. I was the first one getting in a house among my friend group. So my flat became like a safe space for everyone where people could come and chill and spend days. So that's what Istanbul was like. I wanted the freedom to be myself. I wanted the safety to be myself. That meant when I moved to Istanbul, I was no longer hiding who I was and I was open about my sexuality. And I was making new connections with the new confidence I found in myself, being who I am and living the life I wanted to. And that's what I built. And the flat was disgusting. We were so fucking poor because my parents were punishing me for moving to Istanbul. So they weren't sending me a lot of money. So we didn't have heating. We only had heating in the living room. We didn't have furniture. His sister had a divorce, so we took her sofas. We had hot pink sofas. We had no beds, so we had to sleep on those sofas in the living room together. But you know, you're 18, you're living with your boyfriend. You don't have heating, but you don't care. You just put blankets on top of each other, cuddle your boyfriend, and try to sleep. And very soon it was 3 of us. We were cuddling and our cat was laying on top of us. And I was so happy. And hospitality part, I wanted to open the space that I created. Although it was nothing fancy, I wanted it to be the safe space for my friends and my social circle as much as it was for me. And I wanted everyone to feel as comfortable as I wanted to be in that house.
Tell me about sleeping with Sheila the cat.
Oh, she was so tiny. She used to sleep here. For the first 3 months, I think her favorite spot was my neck. And then she grew out of it because she was getting too big. And I have so many photos of her sleeping on my neck when she could fit into my palms. She died last year, unfortunately. I was super happy. I was in Istanbul. I had the freedom to live the way I wanted to live. I had the freedom to set up a home for myself with my boyfriend. You know, because I grew up in a multicultural house and I was speaking several languages, I think I had access to queer content more than my peers in Turkey. So I think my dreams have always been focused on having a gay life, being free and safe to live the way I wanted to be. And that's what I've done when I was in Istanbul. We lived in a horrible neighborhood. The first day, the guy at the market told me not to cross this line, saying, after that, it's not going to be safe for you. And it wasn't. But I lived there for years, and I was super happy.
And tell me about then how life looked in 2016, the year that you were diagnosed.
I was still living with the same person, but we have broken up by then. University work still going out. I dropped out several times trying to prepare again for the university entrance exam in Turkey, which I never took. I had another partner. I was 21 at that time. He was 18. We were gay babies. The dynamic between us, I was the more mature one. I was the more confident one in his sexuality and identity, and I had more boundaries or goals in life that I knew very early on that were crucial and like red lines for me. I wanted to be open about my life with people in my life, and I did not want to lie about my sexuality anymore. I wanted to explore Istanbul, explore life, go do crazy things, and just live my, freedom that I created for myself in Istanbul. And yeah, that's how life looked like.
Earlier you mentioned that you had quite different values and the kind of difficulties that brought up. Specifically, I want to quote you, I gave him what I wish somebody would have given me. Talk to me a bit about giving to him what you wanted.
Oh yeah, I wanted to pull him into my life and give him that freedom, safety, and the physical space for him to explore himself and his identity and figure out who he is. Quite innocent intentions, but in the implementation of these intentions, I may have gotten aggressive because things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. I think it triggered my childhood traumas. I was being hidden again, and that made me feel like something was wrong in our relationship because I didn't want to be someone's secret. Growing up, I was very independent because I had to survive on my own and I had to keep a part of myself hidden. And as an adult, I no longer wanted to do that, but he still had to. And that led to millions of fights because every time I felt like he chose his family over me, which would have been probably healthy behavior for most people. You choose your family over someone you've been dating for a couple of months. But me being also young, I couldn't process it in that way. So that made me resent him because I felt like, there we go again. Someone you thought you were building yourself a future with is not prioritizing you, is hiding you, is again making you feel like you're wrong or less than. And I couldn't take that. I hated it. It made me so aggressive. I resented it. And I think it led to me letting out some of the aggression that accumulated in me that came out as emotional manipulation, aggression that came out in stupid places where I could not get over things, and I would pull previous fights again and again and again because I knew where I wanted to go and I knew how to go there. And in that relationship, I couldn't do it. It just clashed with the way I wanted to live life. And I tried to pull him into the way I wanted to live life, and that didn't go well. We had horrible fights and we had several breakups, and the last one, which I thought was going to be the last one, was so bad. I thought to myself, if I stay here, we lived really close to each other. He lived with his family, obviously, still. I said, if I stay in Istanbul in this neighborhood, we will get back together. So I went to Ankara, where my best friend from high school lived, who has a huge role in my life. She's the first person I came out to. So in my head, she's the first person that accepted me as who I am. And she will always have a special place in my heart. I think I needed that warmth, that acceptance, that prioritization that I couldn't get from my partner at that time. So I went back to her and I tried to get that confidence, acceptance from her because she was a huge part of my life growing up, and I wanted to maybe go back to those moments where I felt empowered enough to start the life I started in Istanbul, and I felt like I needed to start over again, and she could help me in that.
So what kind of things were you doing in Ankara?
We were 23, right? So it's a lot of partying, a lot of substance consumption, a lot of rebound sex, a lot of hangover, a lot of recovering. That's how it was, basically. We were going out almost every night. She was also working at a bar, so we were in that bar staff scene, entering various clubs and bars and parties and taking drugs and just enjoying being 23 and enjoying the life we built for ourselves in our new cities. Because of the bullying and all that, I think I always had an anxious personality, and I think for many gay men, we sometimes don't process things and we just go have sex instead. And I think that was also what I was doing. There was a need of validation that I couldn't get from the relationship, and I wanted to go and get that validation from other men, I think, maybe. One morning I woke up thinking I am having a calm down and I'm hangover from the drugs and the alcohol the night before. Several days passed, everyone recovered, I did not recover, and I was getting more and more sick. There is this, portrayal of HIV in movies, how someone, when they acquire it, gets really, really sick. That is not true for everyone, but in my case it was true, and it was honestly the worst flu, cold, whatever you call it, that I ever had. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body hurt. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't think of HIV, so I went to a doctor in Ankara. They prescribed me antibiotics that I was allergic to. But after a while, after being on so many medication, I started feeling better. But I still could feel something was off in my body. So I went back to Istanbul and get tested for HIV this time. Some bits of this timeline after my diagnosis a bit blurry. That's also why I couldn't do the episode on my own, but I remember getting tested clearly. I was on my way to the bar. The bus was passing by a research hospital in Turkey. You can access HIV treatment only through governmental research hospitals, and I thought, oh wait, they give HIV treatment, so let me go get tested. And probably next day or something, I made an appointment and went back to the hospital to get tested. I was still using antibiotics, and I told the doctor that I've been sick for a while, no one could find out what it is, I've been constantly giving new antibiotica and it's not working, and I asked to get tested for HIV. And she said, why? And me being me and having been sick for the past months, I kind of lost it and I started screaming, I'm a fag who's fucking other men and I want to get tested for HIV, stop asking me why. And then I got tested. This wasn't the first time I had this conversation in a research or university hospital in Turkey, and I was so fed up with it. When I was 18, still living in İzmir with my first partner that I moved in with in Istanbul, when we started dating, we were using condoms, and then we wanted to stop using condoms, and we thought the responsible thing to stop using condoms would be to get tested first, both of us, because we were in a monogamous relationship. So we continued using condoms and get tested twice. And then after that, we stopped using condoms. And the first time we wanted to get tested, we went to the university hospital. We couldn't get tested because no one knew what an HIV test was. And only the head nurse was able to tell us which department to go for getting tested once we said we want to get an AIDS test. So I already knew the awareness on HIV in healthcare settings was very low. And I was so fed up with being sick, and I was so tired and all that. In that moment, I think some of the aggression just came out, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. I've been making appointments in 2 different cities, going to really good hospitals, and they couldn't find what was wrong with me. And then I thought, I'm a gay man, I should be tested for HIV. That's like an obvious thing to do, and they didn't. So I thought, as a young queer person, it was not up to me to request it and make sure that I will get it.
And so you got the test. Tell me about what happened next.
I got the test. They screened for various other things. I didn't have hepatitis. I didn't have chlamydia. I didn't have gonorrhea, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. All of these I could see on the website, but HIV test I couldn't see on the website. And I would get a call from the hospital every other week. And they'd be like, oh, we lost your blood sample, or it was contaminated, or something happened to the blood sample. You need to come back and give another sample. I give blood samples more than 3-4 times just to get tested for HIV. The blood was tested for other things. They all came back negative, but HIV result never came. And again, on my way to the bar one day, I just went to the hospital. And I said, all the results are out. Where is the result for HIV test? And the secretary said, I cannot see it on the system. You don't have an appointment. You cannot see the doctor, but go upstairs to the biochemical lab. And maybe they will have your test results. They can print it there. And I said, okay. I went upstairs. The door is locked. There's a code to enter through the door. And then I thought, I'm at a research hospital in Turkey, in Istanbul. What could the code be? So I put 4 zeros and square. Bam. Door opened. I basically broke into the lab. I'm trying to find the person that I can ask about my HIV test results. I entered this room. There was someone. I gave them my barcode. They printed my test results. And then they looked at them, and their eyes popped out of their sockets. And I wanted to look at the results. They didn't give me, but I already knew at that moment because her face gave away the results. I don't remember exactly what I felt, but I already feel heavy at the moment here. So it was a horrible moment that someone now knew my HIV status and refused to tell me my HIV status, which at that point wasn't even necessary anymore because I learned. So I grabbed my test results, kind of shocked, kind of terrified, not knowing what to do, but I thought I need to go see the doctor. I think all the traumas and the forced learned survival skills that I gained throughout my childhood came into play. Instead of identifying my emotions or feeling my emotions, I focused on a solution. I didn't live the shock. I just focused on getting the treatment in that moment. And in a way, those survival skills literally kept me alive. And I think they also kept me alive and somewhat reasonable in that moment as well, because I was alone in the hospital. I couldn't break down in the middle of a biochemical lab that I broke into, and so I didn't, because I'm already a weirdly dressed, flamboyant gay boy in a hospital. Hyper masculinity is all around me. I'm already getting enough attention from people around me, and then I break down and start crying in the biomedical lab that I broke in.
Yeah, if your
like,
name
I
was
couldn't.
23-year-old Tiffany, the white girl with blonde hair, you could, right? And you'd get the care, but something in you told you that being who you are there, you're not going to receive care, and it's not a place for your vulnerability.
Like, it was
This isn't a
so
memory,
traumatic.
right?
I do not remember what happened, how I reacted, what I felt. Like, there is like a 3-month period of my life getting diagnosed, and right after, I do not clearly remember. I literally went back to people in my life and I asked, what was happening? How was I? because I myself, I think I just blocked it out. Like, all I remember is this in that moment. I remember the room, I remember the fucking machine the test results came out of, and then she was shocked. I genuinely don't know what I felt in that moment. To me, it now feels like I didn't feel anything. I just wanted to see a doctor.
And then tell me about the next 24 hours. What happened?
Next 24 hours, I immediately called a friend that is living with HIV. And I told them the test result came back positive. And they did something reassuring, I think, in their head. They told me, oh, it cannot be positive. It is probably a false positive. So wait for the confirmation test. So yeah, I think his response now looking back was more of a denial than reassurance. And in that moment, I think I needed reassurance that even if it was positive, we were going to get through it together and life was going to be okay. If I am in that position, and I have been in that position several times, I tell people it may be false positive, but I don't tell people, oh, don't worry, it's probably false positive and the confirmation test will say negative. I say, even if it is, you'll be okay, because I've been living with HIV for 10 years and I'm okay, so you'll be okay too. I think that's what I needed, reassurance that regardless of the result of the test, life was going to be fine. I was going to be fine. And then I called my last partner, and of course he was with his mom at home. So I told him to go to the balcony, I think, and I told him I'm at a hospital and I had an HIV test and it came back positive, so he also needs to come and we need to get him tested as well. Of course he freaked out, being even younger than me, and he came to the hospital and he didn't want to get tested at the hospital because he thought his family may figure things out through the national health insurance records, and we had to go to a private clinic, and both of us gave samples and I got tested again. And then we went home that night, but in my head it was clear I had HIV, like there was no question about it. And the private test also came back saying positive, and I was like, okay, I have it. We came home and I think I collapsed and started crying and doing whatever in bed, trying to face that I may be losing the life that I was trying to build for myself. And I just had a breakdown at home. And I don't remember the breakdown. One thing I remember is his phone rang and his mom was calling him to come to dinner. And he chose to leave me a couple of hours after I got a positive test result from an HIV test. He chose to leave me to go home and have dinner with his parents. I think in that moment that may have hurt me more than the HIV test result itself, because I was like, I am literally telling you, I feel like I'm losing my life and I'm losing everything that I wanted to build for myself and none of my dreams will come true. And you're telling me your mom is waiting for you for dinner and you have to go.
What did that feel like?
Betrayal. I wasn't prioritized again. I was left alone again and I was left behind again. And he went. And 10 years passed and I'm still not over this. And I tried to have several confrontations about this with him. And I asked him several times, how could you leave me?
Can you answer that question?
I would never leave. Even someone that I do not know, I would not leave them. I could have committed suicide.
The question you asked, how could you leave me? To the best of your ability now, take a minute and try and answer it.
I know his answer and I probably agree with it. We were too young. He was too young. He didn't know how to handle it. So he left. And probably for him it was also too much to handle. And he chose to leave. Yeah, I guess he went back to his routine because maybe he didn't know how to deal with his nerves, and going back to dinner at home with his parents was his way of blocking my drama out and going back to his routine and what he can handle. He was probably trying to balance two worlds that cannot be balanced, and that's what he did.
And does that move you in any way along this path?
I'm so angry. I am still to this day so angry. And I don't think I will ever get over it.
And what happened after that then?
I don't remember. The rest is very blurry. I know I had depression. I went to hospital many times in the coming months, starting treatment, getting vaccinations, getting tested for various things. My CD4 counts were really low, so we were focusing on improving my immune system. And I was mostly with friends. I was with this friend who was living with HIV and his partner. We were spending time together, getting stoned, just watching things on Netflix, cooking, and just reminding each other that we'll be okay and we'll survive and we'll live through this.
Sounds like you found a lot of power in community.
I always did, yeah. It took me a while to find my communities, to come into terms with my identities, but once I did, I literally held on to them for dear life, and they did keep me alive. My partner wasn't there, my parents weren't there to support me through any of this, but my community and my friends were. And one thing we actually didn't talk through, which could also be part of my trauma as well, when I came out to my parents, which is a whole episode on its own, when I came out to my parents, I remember one line my mom said. 2 lines. You told me not to joke, but I'm gonna joke. I remember 2 lines that my mom said. First, she said that I'm gonna be a boy toy of older men, which I became, and I loved it. Second, she said, you're gonna get sick. And there was a part of me that thought, shit, mom was right. I am now sick. And then probably I started questioning, what else was she right about? Is my life going to suck? And am I going to have a horrible life just because of who I love and who I'm attracted to? And maybe more than the HIV itself, that was the internal battle that I was giving, that I was trying to pass through the shame that was installed in me as I was very young. And I was doing that in Istanbul, and that process was interrupted by HIV, and it triggered everything else that happened before HIV, and I had to kind of relive or process all of that again with HIV this time.
That was really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good bit. After you saying that, it's hard for me to transition to the next bit because it seems so dry, but I'll do it anyway.
This bitch had been trying to make me cry, and now that I gave an emotional response, he's stuck.
Yeah, no, it's the first bit you've offered, really. Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole conversation in itself. But let's talk about medical recommendations that you received. Describe them, and then you can give your expertise on whether they're valid.
In the second appointment I had with my doctor, we were talking about my life. There is this form that we had to fill and create my HIV file, whatever. And yeah, she asked me a bunch of questions about my diet, my sleeping schedule, my work, my school, my drug consumption and everything. And she didn't like it. She basically did not like the life that I built for myself after moving to Istanbul to find myself. And then she told me what I need to change about it. Medical recommendations that she has given me included: stop being a vegetarian, your body needs meat. So I stopped being a vegetarian. Stop drinking alcohol. It's not good for you, and you cannot be living with HIV and drink alcohol. So I stopped drinking alcohol. Stop smoking. So I stopped smoking. And then she told me I could not work at a bar living with HIV, and the sleep schedules weren't good for me. So I stopped working at a bar. But these were all things that gave pleasure to me and made my life livable for me. And because I was told by a doctor this was the only way and how I should live if I want to live with HIV, I listened to it. I stopped all of these at the same time. And then I had a horrible depression because I didn't enjoy my life anymore. I went to the bar, told again everyone that I was diagnosed with HIV and I had to leave the bar. Everyone shocked. But yeah, those were the medical recommendations.
And how is there any medical validity to any of these, or any kind of anything you think has any wisdom in it, or do you think they all need to go in the bin?
I mean, of course, no one should be smoking. It's unhealthy. It's being told by a doctor to stop smoking is not a shocker, obviously. Don't drink alcohol at all was a bit extreme. But again, you should also have your alcohol consumption under control. That's also not shocking. But stop being vegetarian is such a ridiculous thing to say. As long as your diet is balanced, being a vegetarian should play no role of you living with HIV, right? But yeah, my body was weakened because of not eating properly and not sleeping properly the months before. But of course, I could have stayed vegetarian and continued at least my dietary preferences and also start healing with HIV. Like, that was possible. That was stupid.
And talk to me a bit about the treatment that was offered to you.
Turkish healthcare system doesn't reimburse all of the HIV medication costs, so we usually follow with a bit of a delay, right? So we don't have the same treatments in Europe usually, or in Western Europe. We get something that was the best maybe 5 years ago, and I wanted to do my own research and choose something that was acceptable for me, which meant I had to take an HIV medication for years that could interact with other drugs that I was taking, and no one told me it could actually stop my heart. I could be out taking MDMA with my friends, and it could interact with the medication that I was on at that time, and it could have killed me. And although my doctor asked me about my drug consumption, which freaked me out again because I thought I was in a governmental hospital, and how am I supposed to tell them what I use? Am I going to be arrested on top of getting HIV diagnosis? She didn't tell me. She didn't tell me these medications could interact with the drugs that you are using. So I didn't know.
Why do you think she didn't tell you?
Again, drugs, they are not talked about in Turkey. Harm reduction, no one knows about harm reduction in Turkey. Drugs, no, don't do it. That's all they know. Doesn't matter that I've told you 5 minutes ago I use MDMA and weed. She couldn't care less. 5 minutes after, she prescribed me something that could interact with MDMA and kill me. Her responsibility, I think, is to tell you, I'm prescribing you these drugs and you've mentioned that you use MDMA, whatever, and these two interact and you shouldn't use them together. It may also be the case that she didn't know. HIV is barely covered in medical education in Turkey, let alone the interaction between HIV medications and party drugs. She may have not known.
And we're almost at the end now, so I'm going to ask about life today. How does life today look versus life then?
How does life look today? I'm still trying to find myself. I'm still moving around, still very connected to the communities that kept me alive, and trying to take an active role in the communities to keep other people alive and make life easier for them. There are so many things that I'm doing at the same time. I'm still studying for my second master's in anthropology, hoping for a PhD in medical anthropology. I just take a pill every day and I go to bed and it's okay. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and realize I did not take the medication last night, so I take the medication in the morning. Other than this, HIV didn't do what I thought it was going to do to my life, and I wish I knew that the day that I learned my HIV diagnosis from this woman's face. I cannot say HIV hasn't changed my life, or I don't think about HIV any regular day, because I work in HIV, so I probably think 10 times more about HIV and people living with HIV compared to someone who's living with HIV but not working on HIV. So HIV has truly changed my life and gave me a new life in the way that I never thought or saw coming, but only because, again, I faced it head first. I ran towards it instead of running away from it, and I delved myself into HIV work and HIV communities. And one thing that has changed since last year, since I quit my job, was actually after I quit, I stopped traveling for projects to meet communities affected by HIV, and I realized I also lost a portion of my support structure by losing my contact with communities around the world. So that made me wobble and shake a little bit in Switzerland. So I had to find my way and my communities around Switzerland. And two major things helped me in that. We may dive into these in the future episodes, but I started working with AIDS for Switzerland. And then I also got a job at a gay bar because I thought, why not? You're in a major European city, go live your gay life. And I thought, I cannot make friends, so let me work at a gay bar and maybe I'll make friends through the bar. And that's how life with HIV looks like at the moment. And I'm working at a bar, drinking alcohol, smoking, doing drugs sometimes, dating, and life is okay. HIV didn't take any of these away from my life as I thought and as I was told that it would. Before HIV, I thought I needed to leave people behind if I wanted to build the life for myself that I wanted to live. And I have done that. I've done that when I left home, when I left Istanbul. I've done that when I came out to friends and things didn't go as expected, and I cut them out of my life. Also, many family members, I just cut people out because I knew what I wanted to go, And if you did not agree with it, you didn't need to be in it anymore. So I was quite comfortable with leaving people behind to go where I wanted to go. But with HIV, I surrounded myself with people instead of leaving them behind. I think it taught me to try to move ahead together. I think that's the biggest thing HIV has changed in my life. Instead of running away from people, I started letting people help me. I started surviving not on my own, but surviving with others. And that feels better.
Now, give me a couple of things that you think any young LGBT person, and particularly those living with HIV, what they should know based on your story. What would you want them to learn from this?
Whatever happens to you in your life, okay. I used to work at an LGBTI hotline in Istanbul, answering calls from all around the country and Middle East, and we had a catchphrase. We would try to tell every caller that they're not alone and they're not wrong. Alone and wrong are similar words in Turkish, so that makes more sense. We would basically say, yanlış ya da yalnız değilsin. You're not wrong, you're not alone. And if you have HIV, if you think you may have HIV, or whatever should happen to you, you're not alone. You're not the only young queer person going through that. And you will never be alone. You just need to find your people and people who can guide you through things. And things are easier to handle with other people instead of trying to survive on your own.